First of all, thank you very much, Susan, for your generous words. It is true, I broke a lot of glass ceilings, but the problem is I broke them with my head. Try to do in a different way. Members of the Americas Society and the Council of Americas, dear friend, dear all, I'm honored to be with you today. Many thanks for inviting me to participate and one of the keynote speakers to this 12th annual Flax's Women's Hemispheric Network Conference. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you some thoughts on these interesting topics. The title of the conference today, this year, could not be more motivating. Empowering tomorrow's workforce, mentorship, and the future of work. Women, work, power, future. Relevant experts, for scientists to politicians, consider that humanity is currently living a new era. Never before there has been such a deep transformation in terms of global scope, social dimension, and especially speed of change. This is the real impact of the digital revolution or the even more pressing threat of climate change on our way of life. This transformation, the digital revolution, is also more intense as it profoundly affects habits, products, processes, institutions, women at a vertiginous pace. For this reason, many people consider that we are not facing just a change of circle like those of the last decades, but a new era. And this is so. The response of terms of future leaders' qualities and solutions must be also very different. Susan and her team encouraged me to share with you my experiences and points of view on leadership and the role of us women in this changing world. I'm not much for telling grandma stories, and one other reason, as you can see, because I am from old enough. But I have lived, experienced, and suffered a lot of things in my 18 years as politician in Spain, and also during these last years in a global film. And I think it is only fair to share with you some of this experience. First question. We say in Spain, if you don't risk, you don't win. Si no arriesgas, no ganas. This is one of my mantras, and I shall explain myself. If you Google my beginnings in politics, you will read that my political career began with a bus trip in a wall of fake news. I can assure you this information is absolutely true. I started my legal career as a state lawyer. State lawyer is a lawyer in Spain who defends, advises, and represents the public administration. And I was working as such in a medium-sized town in the northwest of Spain when the opportunity arose to work with the then Vice President of the government, Mariano Rajoy. It was the year 2000. Rajoy's team organized an interview, and I chose to travel to Madrid from this medium-sized town by bus, because, to tell the truth, I never liked driving, and I had a lot of things to think about, to prepare for the interview. But in this interview, I remember the key question Rajoy asked me. This is the question. Are you used to managing critical situations? Premonitory. It is true of what my years in politics were like. Economic crisis in 2011, terrorist attacks, territorial conflicts, and so on. At that time, 2000, the lawsuits I handled seems very critical to me and answer without any hesitation, yes, of course. And we say in Spain, me tiré a la piscina. I jumped into the deep end. 11 years later, 2011, I was sitting in the chair of the person who gave me this interview. As his electoral ticket, his vice president, and he was elected the next president of the government of Spain. One margin note, a leader is someone who asks good questions, not the one who has always the answer. We need to start learning to ask. When I was appointed as the vice president or deputy prime minister, as you prefer, of the Spanish government, I was a young woman, 40 years old, with a baby who has just been born 1 month earlier. Difficult situation. But it was also an opportunity to work for my country in a very difficult moment, economic crisis, and to experience incredible professional opportunities. And I didn't give up. It was not easy. Life is not easy in general, but I was able to do that. It is because my husband took his serious responsibility for the upbringing of our son, and I must confess, part of mine as well. He has been raised by a mother who worked outside their home too. By this, I mean that we, men and women, but especially women, have the responsibility to bring up our children equally, both men and women, so that the future will be one of shared responsibility in our family lives. Co-responsibility is the key to make everyone aware of these difficulties of the conciliation and to act accordingly. And education is the first step. Education and family. Women cannot achieve equally in the workplace if they are in an equal position with the household. That means leveling the playing field and making sure that having children does not prevent women from fully participation in the economy and realizing their hopes and their aspirations. Second question. It is said that teleworking, working on remote, can help us, women, to reconcile work and family life. But my personal opinion, just my opinion, we should be careful with this general approach. The problems of reconciling work and family life resulting from remote working are already affecting the mental health of women. In Spain, 9% of women suffer from anxiety, and just 4% of men. Women telework more than men. Moreover, we are in a conference for networking today. No? Remote working can again deprive women of a network of relationship that can help them improve their careers. It is very difficult to have an active networking from home. And when you, women, limit your social outings to taking your children to friends' birthday party. Very difficult to can have luck, but it is not an easy environment to do that. It is easier for men to share a lot of hobbies, football, golf, will help them both develop their personal life. Women have also a personal life, and we have the right to develop it, but also to create and to develop interesting social contracts, doing that, developing, enjoying their hobbies. Women and companies should take into account that our professional life requires an intelligent and a smart balance between face-to-face and remote work. Second lesson I learned. If you risk, of course, you can lose. Arriesgas, unas veces se gana, otras veces se pierde. Women are often very afraid to fail. But I am one of those who don't see failure as an end, as a restart. We can reset and continue. In a trial and error mechanics, failing is one of the best methods of learning. We live in a world where failure is demonized, but life is a constant succession of achievements and frustrations. I see, and I recommend you to see, every failure as a twist in the script, and stories without this are not very exciting and boring. Imagine how little I could tell you here today. In my political life, I have won and lost elections, a lot of them. In my political party, I won a primary elections to be the candidate for the president of the Spanish government, but I lost the internal Congress after that. I sat for competitive examination in which I could pass or fail. Sometimes the luck is the unavoidable factor. But we are talking about women. Of course, there is no lack of obstacles for women. Certainly, I have the feeling that more is asked for us, that women are under harder scrutiny. How many times we women thrown out an idea in a meeting with no apparent reaction from anyone, and when this idea is repeated by a male colleague, is it celebrated as an extraordinary stroke of genius? A lot of times. Also, during the Council of Ministers meetings, not the president, I must to say that. We ourselves, we women, sometimes boycott our own career by seeking a perfection that does not exist, avoiding appearing ambitious. Ambition, well, it's curious, it's a mutual quality that seems negative or positive depending on the gender. Ambition is good. You reach things, your ambition. Success or failure, third question. I think the journey is the important issue. You will have goals, dreams. You young leaders should, in my opinion, enjoy the journey, even it is hard and tortuous. People in Spain remember me for my time in the government. Sometimes kindly and sometimes not so kindly. But I fully also remember my time in opposition, the journey to triumph, the journey to the government, the debates, the strategy, building an alternative, discussing with your team, camaraderie, solidarity, working together to achieve a common goal. But when I look at my son, 11 years, I think that this journey and his journey in the world, in the changing world, is going to be much more complex and uncertain than mine. But I also think that he has grown up in it, and it has better skills to understand and navigate the new world. Just an example. There is no self-respecting conversation these days, without talk about artificial intelligence. We are all concerned about the changes it implies to jobs, businesses. I believe this transformation, this new era, will dwarf the effects of the Industrial Revolution 2 centuries ago. I also passionate about the possibilities it has given humanity to better understand the world it inhabits, how it multiplies our advances in knowledge and innovation. But we must be aware that the technology gap can lead to a new equality gap for women. According to UNESCO, globally, women represent only 35% of those people in higher education in STEM, science, technology, engineering, as mathematics, as you know. And women represent less than 30% of scientists' research. But good news. Latin America and the Caribbean is one of the 2 regions that have reached parity in the proportion of male and female researchers. 45 of all researchers here are women. Yet, women are still underrepresented at the highest level of professional careers and remain a minority in many STEM fields in almost all the countries of the region. If these occupations, STEM occupation, will generate the largest number of higher paid jobs in the industry, we can conclude easily that the new gender pay gap may result for the lower female present in these careers. Moreover, for our societies in general, gender gaps reduce the potential for innovation, for growth, and the new perspective to address current and future challenges. We speak about artificial intelligence. Speak also about female intelligence. Imagine how could have been the evolution of history and human development if female intelligence had also been used for centuries. Don't repeat over and over again the same mistake. On the other hand, the development of AI and new technologies in general make all of us ethical and moral questions, in particular, the role of manhood, and the role of womanhood, of course. What is our essence? What makes us uniquely human? What will survive? The World Economic Forum predicts that 45% of workers' skills will be disrupted in the next 5 years. Cognitive skills are becoming increasingly important in the workplace, as the ability to solve complex problems. The importance of creative thinking is particularly interesting in this respect. In a more poetical way, Einstein said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Let me explain. Probably in this new time, we should look back to our origins, trust our instinct. Female knows a lot of that. And be authentic. The true leaders are the ones who know how to inspire trust in their teams, in their companies, and their countries. And there is nothing more trustworthy than authenticity. It is true that social networks impose their rules, and the internet no longer reflects reality, but shapes it. But, curiously, in our digital society, true personalities, true leaders, attract like a magnet. Think about that. More human, more opportunities. They are all infinite. And I want to do so by talking about values, about those values that will make it possible to truly speak of an advanced society. On the one hand, the freedom of the individual and equality in our society. Not just equality before the law, real equality of opportunity must take advantage of the benefits to the digital world offers us, but not succumb, and this is a risk, to its tremendous challenge. And moreover, in this critical moment, the defense of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law are of particular importance for all of us. And I think we have to be very, very, very grateful and give thank you very much to institutions, our host today, which work every day with this kind of initiatives for a world of higher progress. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Susan and Soraya, for your inspiring stories. That was amazing. All right, now we will now continue with our first panel discussion on choosing your future of work. So I would like to invite our distinguished speakers to the stage. Simone Morato, President and CEO of Safra National Bank. Lisa Schneller, Managing Director and Lead Analyst at S&P Global Ratings. Jennifer Killer, Vice President of Global HR at the AES Corporation. And Stacy Marie Ishmael, Managing Editor at Crypto Bloomberg, to moderate the conversation. Stacy, mic is yours.
Thank you. Always a hard act to follow someone who's won so many elections, but we will do our best. Hello, buenos dias, bon dia. My name is Stacy Marie Ishmael. I work in crypto at Bloomberg News. Please do not ask me any questions about crypto. This is not why we're here today. I am truly delighted to be here with this wonderful panel. As a person who grew up in the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago, it is always a pleasure to actually hear people say things about the region that I am from, and we will certainly be bringing some of that energy into today's conversation. I'm going to do a very quick set of introductions to my esteemed panelists, and I ask them all to think about this question, which is, what is something that you can share about yourself that no one would believe if you weren't being your authentic self, to quote our keynote speaker? So, Simone, I'm going to start with you. You are the president and CEO of Safra National Bank. What is your secret thing?
I think I found out now that I have something in common with Soraya. And she was saying that her husband took the role of helping a lot, or maybe being the primary role of raising her kid. And I want to share that I have the same situation. My husband I'm originally from Brazil. And when I came to US because of my career, my husband became a stay-home dad to help me during my journey in the financial market.
Secret superpower is the house husband. Lisa, same question for you. What's your secret thing?
As a mom, a single mom by choice, I think one of the things that, as I try and manage everything, I've grown into being more of more of a dad as well, as an assistant scoutmaster in my son's scout troop, and taking Taekwondo with him, which are things I would never have thought I would have done.
Dangerous combination.
Yeah, so thinking of taking new risks, those are very risky for me.
Amazing. And last but not least, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes. So I think the one thing most people wouldn't believe about me, given how introverted I am in my day-to-day life, is I love to sing. And in the interest of encouraging my girls to get out there and, perform to their heart's content, I have actually taken up singing in public recently with our theater group. So,
what an awesome group. Give it up for these brave, fearless women. So it's a real pleasure to be able to build on some of the themes that you heard from Soraya. I scribbled desperately this line, women are very often afraid to fail, but we can reset and continue. And I think this idea of the fact that over the course of our careers, and increasingly in the world in which we live, it's not going to be one career, it's going to be lots of different things. There are going to be moments, there are going to be milestones when we might have to turn left or turn right or jump over or under in some cases. And, Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to sort of continue on this theme of, as you look back on some of the decisions and some of the challenges that you've made, how would you describe how you're different now and what you learned from those things? As we have folks here who are well into their first, second, fifth careers, and we have people who might be just embarking on their first one.
yes, thank you. So I think one thing I'm much better at now than I was early in my career is asking for help and sort of tapping into my network. So I started off early, worked long hours, to be honest, and ended up having twins in my mid-30s, which put me on a 14-week bed rest. And I actually ended up being out of the office for half a year with the bed rest and the maternity leave combined. Wondered if I was going to be able to get back to, sort of my career aspirations after that, but realized that quickly, actually, that there's a lot of empathy in the workplace for people who are raising children and young families. And I ended up asking for some additional time off. I was granted it. Wondered if it would stall me. It didn't. I was had the opportunity to be promoted a year later. So I think the reality is I could never have done all of that had I not asked for the flexibility and asked for the help and asked for, and be real, honest with myself about what I was capable of doing in that moment. And it's, paid in dividends for me, so.
And, Jennifer, I want to ask you this question about work-life balance, because we just heard that all of you started with facts about your lives and not your work. And that's something that I really appreciate. And you are a person who, works in HR. You're going to have lots of people being like, I too would like some leave. But what does work-life balance really mean these days in sort of 2023 as opposed to 10, 15, or 20 years ago?
Yes, I think for me, work-life balance is really about integration. It's being able to integrate sort of your world around you, and how much work and how much family really is up to you. And it's not always easy. I also have a husband who was very supportive. Spent a lot of time with my children so that I could do travel and I could do other things, as my career was taking off. So I think in terms of the balance, yeah, I like to say this, it's not pretty. But I think, the reality is if we want to achieve, whether it's raising a family or we want to be able to aspire to great things in our career, we need to be able to make those pieces work together. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You need to bring it together. Otherwise, it's bound to fall apart if you can't, find the right pieces. So I don't know. I think it's gotten, in some ways, easier, in some ways harder, actually, post-pandemic. I think, again, the flexibility is one thing that's easier, maybe, although I'm hearing, actually, that there are trends now where that's maybe we're not as flexible as we were at the, immediately following the pandemic. But the ability to advocate for yourself, that's always been there. The ability to ask for help, tap into your network, we've had to do that for a long time. So I think, there are some things that are different, there are some things that are improving, and I absolutely couldn't agree more. We need to use technology better to make this, better experience for everybody.
And Lisa, I'm going to turn to you because you have somehow balanced life, academia, work, and Taekwondo. And when you think about successfully achieving work-life balance, is it like you're home by 5 p.m.? Is it you're up by after 5 a.m.? Like what on a day-to-day basis, what does that represent for you?
I love the word integration because I don't feel balance, and that's what I was going to say. For work-life balance, there's never, for me, a balance. Mm-hmm. It's a juggle. And if I think back on the career path, when I was, in graduate school, a professor, early on in the career, it was 150% work. Mm-hmm. I had to learn to shift from 7 days a week working doing a PhD to, I can pare this down to 6 or to 5. 6, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Now, with a 13-year-old, I like the word juggling act, mm-hmm. Okay? And I can't give 100% to the work and 100% to him at the same time. It's kind of moving between. And so I might be, as late last night, up till 1, but sometimes I'm doing some work emails after getting home, et cetera. I might be up at 4 if I don't have that energy. So it's that flexibility piece, but it's putting different things. At one point, this is the priority, then I have to shift gears to the other priority. It doesn't feel balanced. In the middle of I'm thinking of a crazy week last week. I had learning to say no. Okay, I never did that earlier on in my career. Okay, and I had to say no to a colleague who I ran a meeting, but then I couldn't do the follow-up for. I had to delegate that, learning to delegate, to another senior colleague. And then, because I had other work things that took priority over making that. But then I had to carve out time for a meeting with, for my son, that I had carved out time and I wasn't available. So it's never a balance. It's a juggle and kind of shifting priorities.
Simone, you are a chief executive officer. I imagine you tell people no all day long. So what in your experience does work-life balance work for you? And also, as someone who grew up outside of the corporate cultures of the United States, are there any things about your previous experience that you think are different or in any ways better?
I have to agree with Lisa that I think it's a myth that the balance would exist. I think it's hard. I think you have to feel good about yourself and less guilty on the decisions that you make. So you may prioritize certain things on your personal life in a certain moment, and you may prioritize your work in other moments. But I think the difficult part is how you feel good about yourself and about decisions, and you have to stop this guilty trip of I'm not a good mom, or I'm not a good CEO, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. So I think we are our worst critical person. And we women, we really try something that Soraya said, we aim for perfection, but we forget that perfection does not exist. But we really try hard to be perfect, and it is impossible. So I think over the years, I learned that, and I learned to say no. I don't say so many no's.
Some no's.
But anyway, I learned to say no, and I learned also to delegate, which is hard, because when you try to be perfectionist and you delegate, and then you criticize what the person did because the person did differently from you. So in a way, you have also to make peace with that. You know that you delegate, and you have to trust, and you have to move on, and you guide. But that's it. So I think the balance itself, I'll break the news, I think does not exist. Talking a little bit about the evolution of my career in corporate culture, I think when I became CEO, I was 36 to 37, and I had a footprint of a male leadership. And I thought that to be a CEO and to be respected, and I was so young, and I was a woman, and I was from Brazil, I had to be aggressive, or I have to behave like a man and include bad words on my vocabulary and things like that. In the financial market, you guys know that, you say something. And so it was funny because I became that person, but I was not that person. And I think what changed also when you believe in yourself is that you become yourself. And you don't have to act like a man or to act like a different leadership or to be different. I think what we have to learn is that emotional intelligence and empathy, they go a long way. So I think women have certain characteristics that are very, very important to be nurtured and to be used on your day-to-day, even in the financial markets. It doesn't matter in any position that you are, because you don't need to have a footprint of the 80s. And I was thinking, when people watch like Wolf of Wall Street or things like that, that is so 80s, and that does not exist anymore. So embrace who you are, and embrace this empathy, and embrace the good qualities that we can bring to the table.
Yes, mercifully, we are not all always be closing all day long these days. You heard Susan talk about Claudia Golden. And one of the things that she's known for, and if you don't know her work, incredibly accessible, you should definitely check it out. But one of the things she's known for is sort of continuing to articulate and popularize the notion of something called greedy jobs. And you can just imagine from the word, it's like the jobs that eat all of your time, right? And I say this as a person who works in breaking news. I wake up every morning and I'm like, what fresh hell has happened in the world? And so I think, you're all in positions where you're very familiar with this idea of at any possible moment, a thing is happening and someone is going to need you from a work perspective. What are some of the things that you are more deliberately doing to make your work less greedy? And what are some of the things you are doing in the spaces you have the ability to influence or control to do that for other people? And I'll start with you, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I think, these greedy jobs exist because life doesn't stop, right? And we're fortunate to be in positions, I think, where, you know, we have a lot of influence and we're able to help people, and people need help all the time. As someone who works in HR, sometimes I wake up in the morning and, you know, what hell am I gonna arrive to today? You know, dealing with people all day long. But I think the reality is that we need to find ways to carve out time. I think for me, it's self-care is really important, and being able to find the time in that downtime and know, you know, it's not likely I'm gonna get a call from work at 6 a.m., right? My girls have left for school. That's my time for me, right? Whether that's working out, meditating. Sometimes I'm catching up on emails I didn't get to the night before, but that's very rare these days, because I think the reality is that I've found if I don't create and carve out that time for myself, I do end up, you know, feeling just that burnt out feeling, and feeling like it's just that harder to have to deal with whatever the day is going to throw me. And then I would say the other thing is I try to create that also for other people on my teams, so that, you know, they shouldn't feel guilty if they want to get to their son's basketball game at the end of the day, or they shouldn't feel guilty if they want to take some time off because they have an ill parent and they really think they need to be there. Absolutely go do those things. I try to create that flexibility and help to delegate the work around them, so that, you know, we all create that space for each other. I think one of AAS values is all together, and I really try to embody that in the way we sort of manage our work. You know, not just what we're trying to achieve as a company, but the way we're operating with each other as well.
Thank you. Lisa.
COVID really helped me with that, in the sense of once our office reopened, and we reopened a bit late, right? There were fewer people going in, but my son was back at his school, which happens to be near the office. And a routine that I have now, and I think that comes from kind of a sense of, you know what, you can do that. And that's partly the COVID flexibility, is several days a week. I leave at 3:30 to pick him up, which I never did pre-COVID, right? I had a babysitter who was picking him up. I got home at 7 from the office, et cetera. But that time is, you know what, no, I'm leaving, I'm picking him up, and sometimes he might be coming to the Council of the Americas and sitting in an office upstairs, which he is actually doing right now, while I'm at a meeting here, okay? Or we go home, and I'm on the computer, I'm bringing him to Taekwondo, and I'm on the computer. But I'm like, you know, no, I can't meet at that time, or I can maneuver around it. So that is a way that, kind of building that in, the self-care is so important. And I think, again, another kind of post-COVID example, my Taekwondo example, there was no one in on Mondays for the longest time. I would go to a conference room and do a Zoom Taekwondo, right? Because no one's around. And then here I'm jumping around in a little tiny conference room. And I'm trying to eke it back in a little bit in there, if I can make that class. But I think that's giving that permission, taking more pressure off myself. Oh, I need to do a 40-minute run because I like the running outside. I'm like, well, if I can only do 20 minutes is better than nothing. It's the perfectionist piece. And even taking that off of the self-care time. And those are kind of the ways I've adjusted to try and keep me in there and personal priorities in the middle of a workday.
And Simone, you know, as a person who really, to your point, shapes not just who you are as an authentic leader, but what you want to see in people who are looking up and be like, oh, I have an example of a female CEO. This is what that's like. What are some of the things that you're doing?
I have grown-up kids, which I think makes my life a little easier at this point. I have a 23 and a 21. So I think life changed a lot in that sense. So I don't mind to go home, and I don't like to stay late. So I don't mind to go home. Let's say I get the 6:38 train, and if I have things to do, I will go, I'll have dinner, and I will relax a little bit, and maybe I'm at 10 o'clock answering emails, 10 to 11, and finish certain things. So I try to do what works for me in that period. So I prefer to go home early and now to see my dog, because I don't have the kids, and then maybe walk around with the dog and things like that, and then get back to work later. Or another thing that I was always embarrassed, like when I started my career, is that let's say I had a day that I had to work very late. And then I would be like 8:30 in the office. I said, no, I will arrive 10 or 10, I need to sleep. So I think each person will find out what works for them. But for me, sleep, it's something that I need. My weekends, I try to be really off work, although I like to read a lot of the newspapers and Barron's and Wall Street and this and that. So, but I like to read. It's part of my job, but I like to read that. But I think each one will have to do what works for them. But I think one thing that is important that COVID helped, I also learned to respect the limits of the other people. So I think this is very important. From my 5 direct reports on the wealth management side, 3 are women, and the general counsel of the bank is a woman. And I remember in COVID, she was working from home, and she had the kids running around and talking, and I said, Renata, we can't talk, it's impossible, the kids. And then I said, I'm sorry, call me when you have time, So you have to learn that I have a 23 and a 21, but a lot of the other employees might have small kids or different setup, and we women, we need to learn to hear and to respect the other people. And they will produce so much better, I guarantee you. If I tell this person, the general counsel, you have to go and pick up your kids at 3:30, she lives in Miami, no problem. She said, can I call you at 8? I said, yeah, call me at 8 when you finish the stuff with the kids. So I think we have to help each other also. And I'm talking about moms, but sometimes the dads have to do the same thing. So we have to learn to respect and to give the flexibility and to treat them as you'd like to be treated. And to remember that sometimes you have older kids, but they have small kids, and you have to accommodate certain things. So I think this is super important in any leadership role.
I just want to jump in. I want to totally echo that, because that was a train of thought that I forgot. So because if I'm carving out these times, when people who work with me, do you mind if I have a doctor's appointment? Do you mind if I not go back to the office after? I'm like, absolutely. You know, and I sort of sometimes think, why are they even asking? And it's more the women that will ask.
Of course.
So putting that out there, and I'm like, yeah, I know it. You always do your stuff. Don't worry about it. So totally agree. You have to give, it goes both ways. You need to give it back.
One of the things that you also heard is this idea of mentorships and sponsorships, and that's going to be a theme of today's event. But I wanted to start by asking you to distinguish between what a mentor does for you and what a sponsor does for you, because one of the most profound things I heard when I was a little baby journalist is that women especially, and people from minoritized backgrounds in general, tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored. And so I'm going to ask our HR professional to just share a little bit about what you think that distinction means and why it matters.
Sure. So for us, we think about sponsors as people who are advocating for you in the workplace, giving you visibility opportunities, creating awareness around what your capabilities and potential are. And then mentors are really people who you're counting on or relying on for advice in your day-to-day. Or, if it's once a month you meet with them, so be it. But the reality is that they're sort of helping you see things from the outside in and giving you like regular perspective you might not be seeing in your day-to-day. Whereas those sponsors are really helping to elevate, give you some visibility, create, potential paths for you in the organization is the way we think about that.
Lisa.
So important. And I would say when I was earlier in my career, there were always people who were older than I was, right? And then there's this, for me, it was this gap period because I had to then shift a mindset, which I learned here, Susan, from this forum, right? When I would see these incredible women sitting up here, I'm like, wow, they still have mentors and sponsors. And I felt I lost that. And partly that might have been more in my less networking period when my son was younger and I, didn't have that. But this forum made me think, no, I'm going to be forming mentors with my peers.
Yes.
Okay. And a sponsor now can be my peer versus someone chronologically older, or honestly, someone who's younger, right? 'Cause also, And I have a mentor and a peer in this audience, and I have found that I missed them for a while. And this forum really helped reinforce how important that is. Someone who I feel will have my back pushing up in the office space. And it was a long time ago I had one, and I only have one, I would say, again, more recently. And then I figured out how to build mentors in between. Peers, older, younger, to confide in. And as I'm also then mentoring more junior people, I get much out of that as I reflect and think about my own working style and the fact I'm not good at managing up, right? I keep my head down, I'm better managing to the younger, more junior people to help them grow and forgetting about me growing up. So a lot of insights there, mentoring across age groups, and gotta be a sponsor for those, for everyone.
And Simone, this point about managing up, and I'm going to ask you this as somebody who people should be managing up to you all the time, but like, what does it mean? Because I think a lot of folks, when they become managers, when they become senior leaders, or they look at their senior leaders, they think of management as a thing that is done to them, and not as a thing that you can do to and on behalf of other people. Can you just share a little bit about your experience there?
It's funny because I start thinking of sponsorship. When I think we had to do in our strategic plan, the succession planning and all that. And I said, you know what? I always discuss that we have to be able to hire people that are better than us and people that want our place, our job. And I'm an advocate for that. So the way I start doing that, I think we start discussing, and I said, if I'm not here tomorrow, who is going to be the CEO of the bank? Who am I preparing for that? Who is a good person that can have qualities different than mine, but can lead as well? And I start planting certain seeds, and I start planting certain seeds on the board and on the shareholders, saying, you know, you should pay attention to this person, because if one day I'm not here, you have to count on this one, on that one, on that one. So I think as leaders, you have to have that responsibility that you have to pull people. You have to take talent. You have to make them show their work and to really say, he did it, she did it, we did it. That is the point. So I think it's super important. I mean, I love mentorship, and I did that even with college students and all that. I think it's super nice. But I think in a certain point on your career, you really have to sponsor people and to bring them close and to give them visibility. Being in the board, being with the shareholder, being with an important client. I think that's how you build the people. That's how you build your team. That's how they're going to trust you. And that's, for me, is the real leadership.
I'm just going to do a quick time check. Okay. And just on the second point of managing up, when you are preparing those folks and you're saying to your board kind of very generously, hey, you should be paying attention to these people, what are some of the kinds of things that they are doing to demonstrate that to you, that they're kind of ready for that potential attention?
You're saying the employees. I think you see that on day-to-day. I think you see that when you give a project and they go beyond and they try to help. And I think, you know what I like? Sometimes I'm discussing something with an asset management guy, but he comes with an opinion on a different area, let's say on credit, that is very valuable. So I think you have to have this crossover areas also, that you can see that a person is more holistic. So you can see that the person is paying attention on the whole strategy. So when they show that they are looking not only at their 9-to-5 job, on their job description, on their role, but they are looking at the whole picture and say, I can help this point too or that point too, that is where I think gets my attention, and I say that is a different person.
And Lisa, as somebody who has had several different types of careers, right? Academia is very different from corporate America. You talked about the challenge of learning to manage up. What does that look like for you? How have you been able to learn some of those using your holistic series of things in the way that Simone has just described?
I don't know that I really have learned how to manage.
See, this is the self-deprecation we were just talking
and then
about.
I'm at the top of that list. Okay. I'll give an example. So I'm great at advocating for other people. And then I'm like, hey, maybe and I can advocate if I need to argue something about for my son, right? And I've learned, hey, I need to transfer that skill, right? So recently, a colleague wrote an article that I helped edit, a short piece, and I forwarded it along to my boss, who then actually forwarded along to his boss, who's also my boss, who's out here. You know, she wrote this great piece that I edited, I helped for a Latin American advisor. And, you know, got great, you know, email feedback. And I'm like, oh, gee, maybe I should have sent him to the piece that I did 2 weeks ago, kind of. So I did, right? You know, so it's for doing, I am stronger at seeing the people and pulling them versus, again, I'm of an era where you were supposed to just put your head down, do your work, and that'll show and there's a lot of truth to that. But I can also see over time, and one of the key advice, no, you gotta promote yourself more. I would say in a kind way, right? But the way in your own, I should also say in your own style.
Right.
So okay, so that's the key thing. So don't forget to say, well, I did this, right? Remind, you know, make sure that your boss knows what you're doing. And sometimes I forget to do that versus letting him know what other people are doing. So,
And that's also kind of a key thing for if you do have sponsors, right? It's like you've got to give them ammunition.
yes,
on your
completely.
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Do you forget to say or you don't do? Because I was thinking as you were talking, and I said, I'm great at advocating for other person, but if I have to advocate for myself and go to the shareholder or the board, I freeze. So it's not, I don't think that we forget. I think that we are, I can't explain if this is a woman thing or not, or it's the personality, but I think sometimes we are apologetic and we don't want to look like we are too much aggressive or too much ambitious or too much this or I did. So I think we have to learn that part too, because it's difficult for us. Every time I have to negotiate an agreement, salary, bonus, these things, it's horrible for me.
And I've never done that. Put that out there. I'll tell the.
Yeah, it's like we're humble
I'm
to a fault.
embarrassed.
Yes, and humility is such a great thing to have, but I think at times it's almost like we're humble to a fault because we're not, you know, self-advocating and speaking up for our accomplishments and what the contributions that we're poised to make. So.
And I've been lucky because I have had 2 sponsors, one of whom is now, who have seen that, and they have my back. I feel that way, and it's such a nice feeling. And yeah, you need to do, and my doing it for Carolina's piece was like, hey, I need to do that for mine too, kind of thing.
I'm going to ask the audience a question. When was the last time you asked for something for yourself? Could be big, could be small. Okay, this year. We're in November, but and when was the last time you wanted to ask for something but didn't because you were worried about how it would be received? You know, so I think there's a very real thing that all of you are identifying, which is how do you balance the discomforts of these things that can seem really like masculinized with the necessity of doing them in the positions that you're in, and for some of the folks in the room, for the positions that you want to be in. And I'll share a trick that I learned, which is find a person who fits the description of somebody that people take seriously and get them to do it on your behalf. And that is where the mentors and the allies thing comes from. So the idea is, if I need something done and I know that I am either not comfortable doing it or it'll be received less well if I ask for it, I'll be like, who is the nearest senior white man that I can find who agrees with me, who can make this point in the meeting? And that works like 95% of the time. And the other thing that I'll say is, especially when it comes to like negotiation, just have a really good lawyer and make it their problem. So we have one quick question. And I'll just repeat that for the folks on the who are watching us virtually. It's like, it's not what you deserve, it's what you negotiate. And that's a really important reason for us to speak up. And it's such an important reason to do so many of the things that you all are describing, right? Which is identify the values that are important to you, figure out how you model your authentic self, figure out how you respect the boundaries that other people have, and indeed identify, to your point, Simone, the boundaries that other people have. Do taekwondo in the conference room, leave early when you need to, sleep in when you need to. And because you all are all here because you're doing well. Like, you're not in this room because you are low performers in your organization. And so I think that, learning from what Soraya said and giving yourself the grace to recognize and appreciate for a moment just how far you've come is kind of a key place to be. And I think with that, we will end the session. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Announcements. We're gonna do a 20-minute coffee and networking break in the adjacent room. But please take your belongings because we're gonna leave the room and they're gonna set it up for lunch. And then also, as a treat to our audience, our photographer will be set up in the chairman's office. We'll show you which one is that for free professional headshots. So please ask any staff member for guidance if you wanna have your photo taken. And then after the coffee break, please sit in a different table so you can expand your networking. Thank you.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
Que más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye, doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empodere. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empodere. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de todo este movimiento es el reconocer nuestro poder.
It's not enough to work hard. You have to articulate what it is you want and be comfortable saying that.
Tenemos una responsabilidad ineludible con las nuevas generaciones. Debemos transmitir lo que hemos aprendido y debemos apoyarnos entre nosotras y apoyar a quienes vienen detrás, porque cada día más mujeres seamos partícipes de las decisiones políticas y económicas de nuestras naciones.
Trying to celebrate for young girls and women examples of women who are actually in the public eye doing jobs that are important and doing them well, I think is fantastic.
We have sexism, but that's not going to stop us from growing and improving and working for another woman.
Take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared.
Companies have a large percentage of women in leadership roles and on the board. They substantially outperform their industry peers.
If you have one woman on a board, we are a token. You have to have 2 women on the board. And if you have 2 women on the board, we do make a change.
Since 2012, the Women's Hemispheric Network has created spaces to encourage and inspire young professionals to remain in the workforce, seek opportunities, become leaders, and be able to be whatever they want to be.
El poder no es lo mismo que las empoderen. Lo importante de
Welcome back, everyone. Please take a seat. We're about to begin. We will continue with the headshots during the lunch. Don't worry if you haven't gotten yours. We're just waiting from the... Welcome back, everyone. Please find a seat. We good? We good? All right. We good? Come on. We good? All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back. Welcome back. We're getting started. Please find a seat. We have two amazing segments. The first announcement before we start is that if you did not get your photo taken, we're going to continue doing the headshots during the lunch. So don't worry about that. We will continue to have headshots. All right, so welcome back to those watching us via webcast. And those that are here in person, we are very excited to continue our programming with two more segments. So the first one, it's a keynote fireside conversation. So please welcome Andrew Martin, President of Latin America Cluster for Pfizer, and Ana Dolores Roman, who's the Country Manager of Colombia and Venezuela for Pfizer. Welcome.
Hello? Hello? No? Okay. All right. So thank you, Susan, for the invitation. We're going to be here having this conversation with this group of amazing people here. So I'm going to give the word to Andrew and explain a little bit how we're going to deal, and we're going to have this kind of conversations between us, but especially we're going to see that some of the important insights that we have from the previous panel, probably we're going to see, but in a different perspective, probably we're from the men's as lies, because Andrew, and I'm going to present him, he is my boss, and he has been working with me mostly 1 year. And I have the pleasure to know him from the perspective of an executive, but also in a human being. He preserves all the work under his values to support women in the growth and advancement, and their advancement. So in that sense, it's important for you to know that we're going to have this kind of conversation in terms of how we can deal with different perspectives from a man as lies. So. I'm Ana Dolores Roman. I'm Ecuadorian working in Bogota. I'm happily married with 2 kids, 13 and 9. And this is a challenge, as you see. The balance, the integration, this is something. So I'm going to give the word to Andrew to present himself, and then we'll start this fire chat.
Thank you, Ana Dolores, and I'm definitely not Ana Dolores' boss. We're partners. We have a great partnership in moving the business forward in Colombia. Let me start by also expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to be here today and to talk about a subject, gender equality and diversity, which is profoundly important to me for both a personal and a professional perspective. A quick background on who I am. I've had a blessed 25-plus year career thus far. I started in consumer products out of college. I had the opportunity to manage Asia Pacific and Latin America. And so I spent my first 5 years professionally traveling through those countries. And I'll share some stories from those experiences that helped propel my focus and belief in the power of diversity and inclusion. And I've now been in the healthcare space in pharmaceuticals for 19 years. I started my pharma career at J&J and now been at Pfizer for 17 years. And I've been truly blessed to have had quite an extraordinary journey that's taken me across 4 continents. I've lived and worked in China. I've had the opportunity to work across a number of what we refer to as therapeutic areas like oncology, vaccines, rare disease, to work on launch products. But for me, the most rewarding aspect of those 17 years has been the opportunity to meet so many incredibly talented, diverse, and passionate colleagues, both inside of Pfizer and outside. So it's been a really remarkable journey. I'm often asked about the reason why I'm so passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, in particular gender diversity. And there's really three, I think, sort of defining moments for me. The first is personal, and I've shared this story in previous events. It's my mother. My mother raised 5 children. My father was an attorney at the time. And she basically was she was the CEO of the home, a term that I think now much more appropriately defines the realities of what she did. But I remember at a very early age seeing how men in particular in social environments would dismiss the impact of what she did on a daily basis. And I remember thinking this is just, it made me angry, but it's just absurd because she worked as hard, if not harder, than my father. She was up every night ironing clothes so that we didn't go to school with wrinkled T-shirts. Every night we had a home-cooked meal, and I'm not talking like a box of spaghetti. I mean, she literally cooked a home-cooked meal. She had 5 kids to shuttle to and from soccer practices and never missed a beat. And so I remember thinking, she's working harder than my dad. Why is my dad getting all this sort of respect and admiration? And so that for me was really a powerful driver for my commitment to trying to do what I can to change the perception of the role that women play in society, but whether it's at home or in a professional environment. The second is work. So I had the opportunity early in my career, as I said, to spend time in Asia. And I was confronted very early on with the very powerful cultural norms that put women in a lower level position relative to men. And I remember the first distributor that I signed was this company formed by the most amazingly talented, brilliant woman at that point in my life I think I'd ever met. And we would walk into these big meetings with Walmart and other big retailers, and they would focus on me. And I'd look at them, I'd say to the buyer, this is her business. These are her ideas. This is her business that she started. Why are you deferring to me? And I remember that, again, was a second moment of, like, I have to play a more active role in changing this dynamic. And I recognize in cultures, and particularly those with caste systems, we're talking about thousands of years of ingrained gender and social norms. But again, it convinced me that I had to play a role. And then the last defining moment was I had a leader that I worked for, Beatrice Farrow, who unfortunately left Pfizer a few years ago. One of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life, aside from being brilliant and talented and all of those things, was the most caring and compassionate leader I've ever worked for. And it was the first time I really saw the power of diversity, equity, inclusion at work in a way that I could clearly connect to the impact to colleagues on the team. She created this culture of engagement and inclusion and passion that was unparalleled. And I saw that it was because she started from this position of making sure that everyone felt included and involved. And that if I sent her an interview slate, a candidate slate that wasn't gender diverse, she sent it back. And if I had an interview panel that wasn't gender or racially diverse, she sent it back. And so that's the third sort of real powerful driver for me in terms of my commitment to gender equality.
So now I'm going to tell my story. That is going to be quite similar in some cases. My personal role model was my grandmother. Yeah, my grandmother, back in 1940s, she decided to go away from her house in one of tiny city in Ecuador to study medicine. So she, under the situation, the prejudice that had by that time, she decided to move forward and focus on the decision that was study. So she graduated to be a doctor, and she was one of the most important and respectful Ecuadorian doctors back then. So for me, it was really important. So when I was really young, I saw her because they were having a hospital in their house, and they were together with my grandfather. So they ran a clinic there. So I saw, and then it's the passionate about health, because I saw people with suffering get into there, and they came away after prescription, after I worked with them, having another face. So I saw them that women can pursue their dreams even though they having stereotypes, biases, or problems. So that's my first role model. And I think one of the calls that I want to address here is everybody needs a role model, even though it's going to be a family member, somebody close, but somebody. The second one is I have the pleasure, and he's my husband, have a supportive husband, because this is really important for us, to have a real partnership in the development. And in that case, it's important because you have to be clear how are your priorities, how you're going to deal with the things, because being an executive is not easy. For us, we have to take decisions, tough decisions, make some choices, and then you have to go back at home and to feel safe. And this is the space safe that we have to have. So this is the second call that we have it. Even though you can have a friend, you can have a family, somebody who's supporting you in your career path. I think this is important. And the third one is the difficulties that I faced 15 years ago when I started being a member of a directory, a board. I was the first female member in a board back in Ecuador. And that was one of the toughest situations that I faced, because I have to go there, I have to speak up, and I have to raise my voice. And sometimes that voice was not even heard. And that's really important for us as women, that we have to raise our hands, speak it loud, even though this is difficult, this is complex, or probably is unpopular. And that are my three things: the role model, the family support, and to speak up if we need to do something away. So that's the call. So I have I know you that you have these really careful about gender diversity. So you're actively promoting that. So in your career, you have some strategies, some priorities that you want to share with us about how to deal with these gender diversity issues, because we're facing issues.
Yeah, I think there's three ways that I really focus on driving and supporting gender equality at Pfizer. The first I would characterize as systemic or structural. The second is cultural. And the third is action. And so if I start with the first one, there are a lot of basics that companies just don't get right from a structural or systemic perspective. Less than 50% of companies, if you can believe it, actually track employment status and progression by race and gender. And that includes race and gender together, because women of color are substantially underrepresented when you look at the female workforce, and in particularly when you look at the progression rates of women into higher rates of leadership. I mentioned a second basic component, which is ensuring that when you're out looking for a new candidate, that the candidate slates you get back from your own human resources team or external partners are gender and racially diverse. And relatedly, making sure that the interview panel on the inside is equally diverse. We make this mistake of having this male-dominated panel, and you're not representing gender diversity if that's the case. And then the third area that I focus on from a structural perspective is using the data to make decisions and making sure that we are tracking the progression of women and women of color through various stages of career growth in the organization. And when we're not seeing the progress that we expect, then we have an opportunity to have a conversation with our leadership teams and take the right action. The second is cultural. This is not the easy one. And I ask leaders, and particularly men who have the opportunity to lead gender diverse teams, is you have to instill from the very, very beginning an expectation of gender equality and inclusion. And for me, it starts by having conversations with your teams. And I can assure you the first few conversations will be difficult. And I remember the first time I did this, it was 5 minutes in and someone said something that was kind of questionable. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? We're not off to a good start here. But by the third time we brought that team together, those types of uncertainties or discomfortable or uncomfortable notions started to wash away. And it became an open, candid, non-judgmental conversation about the steps that men and women need to take to truly create an inclusive environment. And the change was profound. And so that's to me is a real simple in articulation, understandably difficult in execution, step that leaders should be taking. You have to create an environment where people feel comfortable confronting microaggressions or gender bias when we see it. And that's the part that takes some practice, because men and women are inherently in a professional environment uncomfortable confronting or calling out another colleague. But we can't change the dynamic if we don't get to a point where I can say, hey, you know what? I'm sure you probably didn't mean it this way, but this is how I felt when you made a comment about being emotional or being helpful. And I want you to understand how that made me feel, as a female colleague, and the effect it has on my confidence in raising my hand and making a comment in a general group environment. And then the third is action. And so I have the opportunity to lead an organization within Pfizer called Men as Allies. And the objective of this organization is to educate men on the importance of male allyship and the role that men play in confronting and transforming the environment into one that's more gender diverse and inclusive. And what we tell men is it's not enough to be educated. It's not enough to be an advocate behind closed doors. You have to be a visible advocate for women where it matters in public settings and in group environments. And so that's the third piece that I really focus on, is making sure that myself, and I hold myself accountable, and that other men in particular are vocal, active advocates for women in the organization.
And taking into consideration these things that we are talking about, I think it will be very interesting for everybody that's here to go back. When you're going back to work, you have to have a real clear conversation, either with your boss, your peer, or people who is working with you directly. Because these kind of things are really important to put an action plan, as you said it. So there are three things that I think is going to be really important. First, we have to stretch ourselves. We have to understand our boundaries. We have to understand your limits. But we have to be really authentic with ourselves, not just with everybody, but we have to be honest. And I think this is critical. In this kind of conversations that you say that we have to talk with a man, with women in terms of career development or any kind of issues that we are facing, you have first to understand what do you want, what do you mean, so that we have to stretch ourselves. Second, we have to listen. And this is really critical, because sometimes we trend to say, because we as women, we want to say all the responses. Being a mom, we have to say that everything is going okay with the kids. We want to have all the responses as mom. We want to have all the responses as boss. We have to have all responses as partner. But we have to be perfectly imperfect. I love that, because we always run to be perfect, but we are not perfect. We have to be the best for ourselves. The best, listen to us. And the third one is to empower. We have to empower our teams. We have to empower ourselves to be really critical with how we're going to deal these kind of things related to gender diversity. And these kind of things, sometimes we have to learn how we can confront biases, how we confront stereotypes, how we confront this male panel that sometimes is facing when we have to have a hiring decision or a retention. So in that case, we have to avoid prejudgments. We have to avoid the erroneous consumption of thinking. We have to ask more and go deeper. But the third thing that we have to have as a gender diversity thinking is, what do we want to think? What do I expect from the others? And have a clear conversation. That's why we have to be actively inclusive, or otherwise you are accidentally exclusive. And this is really important. So we have to be active, and it requires work.
Maybe you could share, Ana Dolores, how you approach the change that you're describing in Colombia, and maybe you could share with the audience here some of the behaviors that you confront in your organization and the role that you think men can and should play in more actively confronting gender biases that exist.
Yeah, I have two things that are really interesting. First of all, we work with a real career path in groups in Colombia, and this is mainly, we have groups with gender, we have groups with Afro-Americans, we're Afro-Colombians, we have groups in terms of ethnicity, in terms of different percentages. So we try to understand what are the needs of these groups. And in that sense, we establish a plan. For example, language. Sometimes we are not caring about the communication of the language that we're using. So we develop a manual of language, which is really important. We have to be careful how we're using your words, how we're dealing with that. So we have a diversity and inclusive language format, which allow us how to deal with that. That's the first one. The second one is if we have the policies, we have to apply them. Yeah, because the policies that you can have, the processes that you have, it probably could be under the desk. But you have to lead by example. And you have to have probably difficult conversations. We have to discuss difficult issues. But it is better to pursue that the policies and procedures are going to be there, and you have to walk the talk, which is really important. So in that sense, in Colombia, I'm so happy because we have some, I can say, success about how to manage the gender diversity, but the other groups that we have to deal with as a part of the inclusiveness that we want to have it. But also, we have very good examples on how to learn and teach women in education, in different communities and vulnerable communities in Colombia, to teach them how to talk in terms of education in health, for instance. And we merged some partners with different associations, such as the Colombian Cardiology Association, to talk about the risk factors for Afro-American women. So, which is, I think, it's really important that to not go just inside the company, to be respectful about what we're doing, but also to showcase examples outside the company, to work with the different minorities, to work with different actions and actionable plans to showcase the examples that we're doing. So that's why we're doing that in Colombia, which I think is different, and I am so happy and thrilled about it.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the work Ann Dolores has done in this regard. And we're very honored to be in a position where we have a fairly public profile in a number of countries in the region, including in Colombia. And we have the scale and wherewithal to make a change. And so Ann Dolores will attest, I often talk about the fact that our responsibilities go well outside the scope of our immediate business, which is delivering innovative medicines to patients who need them. We have a responsibility to the communities in which we operate, in which our colleagues live and work. And we can't ignore the challenges that we face from a gender or diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, just because it's not directly related to the sale of a medicine. And so we purposefully expect that all of our country leaders and our colleagues are actively engaged in these types of social issues outside of the walls of Pfizer.
Yeah, because the reduction of inequalities is a very important part that we have to do it, not just in the pharmaceutical business, but in everything that we do. So I think this is interesting. So, for instance, these responsible hearts in Black population in Colombia that I am referring. We certified 350 women in literacy about these communities to have different access, to have timeless access to health services. So we have to do that inside and outside. This is one of the examples to reduce inequalities in the country. So I don't know if you can have questions from the audience. I think will be interesting. I don't know, but I have one or two that I have it. So probably a final advice. Do you have a final advice for this group of representatives we have here?
I'll use a phrase that my mother used to use, albeit admittedly for a different reason, and that is, it takes two to tango. Normally, she used that phrase when my brother and I were fighting, and one of us was trying to blame the other. But I think it's applicable here, and that is, I always, when I have opportunities to talk about gender equality, make clear that it requires both men and women to be a part of the solution. And it requires talking. And what we say to men and men as allies is that you have to purposefully engage with women in an effort to understand their career journey and to understand the challenges and the microaggressions that they face on a daily or weekly basis, and the collective effect those have on a woman's comfort in being herself, whether it's the way she dresses, the way she wears her hair, or her comfort in speaking up and raising her hand or offering a differing opinion than that which is on the table today. And what I find 100% of the time is that when men do that, they come back and they're shocked, they're saddened, they're embarrassed, because they don't realize the collective effect of these microaggressions, which I think are arguably one of the most insidious actions that occur every day as it relates to gender equality. And what research shows is these are accretive to women. They're not the type of instances that just you wash away in the shower in the morning. They're accretive, and they create scar tissue. And that's why when you talk to women, they say, I don't feel comfortable raising my hand. I don't feel comfortable expressing a difference of opinion, because and it's largely a function of the collective effect of these microaggressions, not having a seat at the table. Susan shared a story with me a few minutes ago about walking into a room and making a brilliant point just to have it dismissed and have a male counterpart make the same point and be applauded for that. And so what we find when men sit down is they realize that women's journeys are vastly more full of friction than that of men. And they realize that they are playing a substantive role in creating that friction. And so what I ask of women is that you are open to that conversation and be accepting that men are not going to be perfect in their effort to understand, and they're not going to ask perfect questions. But if you understand that they're coming at it with the right intent because they want to learn, they want to understand what role they can play, I've seen that time and time again have a profound effect on a team and on a culture. And then the last piece of it, as I said earlier, and I'll just reiterate because I think it's this important, is that men have to be visible advocates for women. Having a conversation in your office behind a closed door to say, I think you're amazing, and I think you've got tremendous upside in this organization, it's important, but it's not enough. It has to be in a room in front of other people, advocating for a woman and saying, you know what, Ann Dolores, that's an amazing point. Things like that matter. And so men have to be visible, active advocates for women if we're ultimately going to see change from a gender equality perspective.
And from these final words that you're saying, I'm going to leave with 10 things that I've been writing for you that I think is going to be worth it. So the first one is to know and understand yourself. So be working with yourself. The second one is to build confidence and self-esteem. The third one, you talk already, find a sponsor, a mentor, or a coach. 4, encourage your authenticity and develop your personal brand. The 5, encourage risk-taking, resilience, and courage. The 6, continuous training and develop yourselves. The 7, foster a new inclusive culture. The 8, establish networks and communication of support. The 9, fight gender bias. And the 10th, encourage visibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good job, Ann Dolores.
Thank you, Andrea and Ana Dolores, for such an insightful conversation. Thank you both so much. All right, I think we have our last segment, and that's going to be a panel on mentoring up and down and the power of a sponsor. So please welcome to the stage Samantha Saperstein. She's the manager and director and head of Women on the Move at JP Morgan Chase & Company. Thank you so much. That was great. Marcela Runes, who's the counsel at Latham Watkins. Can you use that one? So Samantha, you can go to that one. And then Marcela. And then Nicole Ferriapino, who's the VP of E-commerce and Consumer Enterprise and Marketing Data at the Estée Lauder Company. And our moderator, who's Jim Brennan, who's a senior partner at BCG. And Jim, we welcome you to the stage. Oh, he's coming. You can also scan the QR codes. You can read the bios of all of our panelists, and you can use the hashtag to join the conversation online. We thank all of our viewers who are tuning in today. And again, we're going to have more headshots during the lunch. So if you didn't get yours during the coffee break, don't worry. I'm just filling out some tap. You okay? Maybe we can get some water. Some tap. Yes, again, thank you everyone, our sponsors. This wouldn't be possible without you, and I think I see Jim coming. No pressure, Jim. You just got a room full of people waiting for you and thousands of viewers on the webcast.
Hello. Great to see everybody. Did you all do introductions yet? No. All right. Why don't we just go down the line? Everybody say that.
Thank you. Marcela Renes. I work at Latham & Watkins. I've been there for a decade. I'm originally from Mexico. I practiced law in a law firm in Mexico before coming to the LLM. I see some Columbia students right now. I'm a Columbia alumnus. I'm very excited to be here.
Good morning. I'm Sam Saperstein. I run a team called Women on the Move at JPMorgan Chase, and it's our firm's global diversity effort for women. So we do a lot of work inside with people's careers, but also outside the firm. I get to work with entrepreneurs and with women and girls on their financial health. So it's a lot of different careers, businesses, and just personal finance work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Ferriapino. I'm Vice President of E-commerce and Consumer Enterprise Marketing and Data for the Estée Lauder companies. Yeah, that's like a mouthful. I've been with the company for 12 years, and I'm based out of New York, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
Excellent. Thank you all. And Jim Brennan, I'm a partner at BCG in New York. I help lead our consumer private equity business, and it's great to get to moderate this panel today. So thank you, everyone. We're talking about mentorship, which is obviously a pretty critical topic in business and the world today. I say the world because I've seen through my children how it goes all through life, not even just in careers. But from a career perspective, if you think around mentoring, I know you've all been mentors. It'd be great to hear a little bit about how you approach mentorship, how you do it, if that makes sense as an opening question. And whoever wants to jump in, just start.
Yeah, I'll start with that. I also love to distinguish between mentoring and sponsorship. We heard a little bit about that on the prior panel, and I'm a big proponent of sponsorship, so I think I'll start there. I think a sponsor, and I define a sponsor as someone who really actively pounds the table for you. So think of someone in the organization who has influence, who's in a position of power, who can really pull you up through the organization, give you a new job or even a stretch assignment. Think of someone there who can really play a significant role in your career, not just a mentor who might be a coach or someone you talk to from time to time. And I think a sponsor is a critical part of anyone's career success. If you look across your organizations and you see the people at the top, you can probably tell who's been actively sponsoring them. And so I look at that role and I try to counsel women to look for sponsors for themselves, to create those opportunities organically. And also I talk to men about being better sponsors to more diverse people, including women. So think of that difference for yourself, and I know we'll get into more of that later, but find a sponsor. I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do for your career.
Yeah, and then for me, I think my approach when I've been asked to be a sponsor, when I've taken on this role, is to really understand what is that mentee's objectives. You know, what I considered that I wanted from a sponsor, you know, at the beginning of my career is different from what a person wants now. So really understanding that it's a two-way street and how can you add the most value to somebody as their mentor is critical.
And I think that is a very good point about what they try to accomplish. And as a mentee of, you know, who you look for perspective. And that is key, because it may not be someone that is in your field of work. It can be correlated, but it's something that I came to realize as I'm growing in my career, that from what perspective I want to get from my mentor. And again, they're not going to find solutions for me, but give me that broad perspective to give me the tools to make that decision.
I think it's great, and I think it's interesting that you've all talked about tools, how it helps advancement, but specifically the word sponsorship. Interestingly, at BCG, when someone becomes a partner, they are sponsored by someone. It's actually the phrase that is used, and that I've done that a few times in my career, which is pretty exciting to get to do. How do you think mentorship/sponsorship helps in someone's career? What does it drive? What does it do, beyond obviously the fact that advice is great and support is great, but what does it tangibly do for someone, right, as they think about their career and driving forward?
I think particularly a sponsor who's really working to propel you forward is giving you feedback and actively working with you, probably in a way that a day-to-day manager or even a mentor probably isn't. So when I think of a sponsor, not only are they pounding the table for you, they're talking about you behind closed doors and really advocating for you, but they're giving you feedback. And I really encourage you to take that feedback, as hard as it is sometimes or painful to hear, to take it to heart, because a sponsor is someone who has your best interests at heart. Hopefully it's a trusted relationship. And so they're probably holding up a mirror to you and pointing out those blind spots that you might not see otherwise. And I think it's really tragic. We've probably all seen people get to a certain point in their careers with feedback that they just never got before. And at a certain point, it really holds them back from becoming a more senior leader. So a sponsor is someone who's going to show you that feedback, tell you that feedback, probably point out, other ways you can do things. And I think you just have to listen to it and hear it. You might not always take the feedback, but you should always go back and say, I heard you, and I did this or that, and here's how it turned out. So be very responsive too when you get that feedback.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you can find a sponsor that's not necessarily somebody above you, but that is your peer. And I think where that comes into play, the specific point around feedback, there's nobody that's going to be more honest with you than your peer. I think that's what I've sought from peers that I consider sponsors as well in different areas of the company, is seeking out that feedback, that honest feedback. Sometimes when you go to your managers, you don't even have time to have those conversations, or they just happen a couple times a year, or the feedback is not always great if there's a situation. But I think having that ongoing cycle of feedback with people that that will be honest with you, and being able to hear it and to respond to it is super important.
Yeah, and while a sponsor can be a mentor too, I encourage to have someone, have other mentors aside from the sponsor. So again, the relationship with the sponsors and what the sponsor gets can be a little bit more tangible. That is, in my world, expanding, the practice and make it probably at the end game more profitable. So it does have a little bit more of a tangible return, while, a mentor definitely has, returns. I get a lot of feedback and in the mentoring up that we'll talk about on the concept. But, again, going back to the perspective, I think, from a sponsor, it's going to be that mentorship, guided towards that growth, while the mentor is going to give you a little bit more advice of the full picture to it, and that of growing not only into that position with your sponsor, but also outside of it.
Yeah, very much agree. One of the things I learned early in my career, that someone who reviews you is not necessarily a sponsor or a mentor, and you need to figure out the difference between that, right, as you roll along. But how do you pick or find, right, a mentor or a sponsor, the matchmaking element of it? Like, how does it happen? Because I've definitely talked to more junior colleagues over the years who are like, well, how do I figure out who's going to do that for me? Like, what drives it?
I think, if I could just jump in, taking a step back as I was preparing for this, I looked up, what is the true meaning of mentorship? And what I found was the act or process of guiding another person to support their personal development. And what struck me about that is that it said personal and not professional, because at the end of the day, you know, mentorship is about people. So, you know, I am on a personal note, lost my mother when I was very young. My father was a widow at almost 40. So you can imagine throughout my life, my early life, I had many people step into mentorship roles, whether it was teachers, you know, mothers, friends of my mother's who at times maybe wanted to date my dad, but you know, I had a lot of support.
That's not best practice.
Yeah. I mean, he was 40, but you know, but I was very fortunate to, you know, what that, it provoked in me thinking, wow, I've had mentors my entire life and how lucky I've been. And for me, you know, when we're talking about picking them, I remember my first day at Estee Lauder, my first week at Estee Lauder, the SVP of creative, a woman that worked uptown, I worked downtown, I had a very junior position. My first week on the job, she set up 2 meetings with me. One was with the lead of global corporate affairs for the company, and the other one was with the lead for PR for the company, both Latina women. And so she picked them for me. She said she found people with a similar background to mine that she thought could be helpful in my career. And those are still friends, mentors. They've gone to other companies. Some are still there. But I think sometimes the mentor is picked for you. And that's super important, as well as you start to, you know, get your grounding maybe in a new company and new places. And as you start to build those relationships, having somebody facilitate them for you is super great.
And well, I'm still figuring it out, but what I've come to realize is that it doesn't have to be, you know, the best at it, you know, the biggest shot at, you know, your practice or your professional network, but someone that is closer to, you know, your certain situation. I've, you know, been lucky enough to pick up mentors along the way. And right now, as I'm in that kind of turning point in my career of that seniority, I found myself a mentor that it was really a surprise for me. And that was something, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but like who would give me perspective. And I saw, I ran into an old client that I always thought was, you know, big shot at his career, that's correlated to mine, that found himself out of a job after, you know, after 35 years in the same institution. And I was like, well, maybe he can give me a little bit more, you know, perspective on what, you know, what was his career and what is his, you know, thought in hindsight and what he could have done maybe differently. And, you know, and maybe being out of a job is the best thing that ever happened to him. So I now, you know, I kind of gave it a shot, called him up, and hey, I really need your advice. I'm at this, you know, point in my career that I don't know how to go about it. So I'm trying, would you have coffee with me? And he was more than excited to have coffee with me, which is, you know, completely different from my background. German born, white male, completely different. And we've been in touch, and we touch base every week. All that to say is that this brings to like still figure it out, because he was one that was at the right point, at the right, you know, moment of my career, and that, you know, I'm hoping, you know, to carry him or carry me along as I make these very important decisions in my career.
So I've spoken to so many executives about the sponsorship journey, and most of them will say they developed these relationships organically by themselves. They were not matched in a program. And so I think when it comes to finding this for each of you, don't rely on corporate programs to do this. They might happen, but they most likely will not. So here are the 3 ways that I've seen time and again people develop their sponsors. And I think depending on your stage of your career or what your interests are, one of these 3 hopefully will appeal to you. The first is to become a real expert in something, a real deep thought leadership or knowledge person. You're the best researcher, you're the best at clients, you're the best at something that people around you always say, oh yes, she's the best at that. And you build that reputation that way, and people will often come to you because they want you on their team, they know you'll be able to solve the problem. That really goes a long way, and it's great for people early in their careers when they really are developing a core skill set in something and they want to be known for it. So think about being that thought leader expert. And the person who comes to mind when I think about this is Condoleezza Rice, a former Secretary of State in the US. She was such a deep Soviet specialist, and that is what helped propel her career when no one had done that before. A Black woman like her, no one had been in that role. The second is to really be a go-getter, is what I call it. To be the person who just volunteers to do a lot of work, more than just your stated job and your responsibilities. And this is pretty straightforward for anyone too. You might not know what you want to be focused on, but if you find managers or other people around you who seem to need the help, run toward that, run toward that fire and really volunteer to do things that might go beyond to help that person. And the third is just being a great networker. We've seen so many people in our company take advantage of events and our business resource groups and just other times to interact with people. They connect with people on things far beyond work. They might be shared hobbies or a background or some skill, and that's how people meet each other. And it's amazing how that relationship, that kernel that starts there, can really go forward into work. So think about those three approaches, what might work for you, and try them with different people. But first, get a list of people that you really want to develop a relationship with and figure out your best approach.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is you all have different perspectives, which is it really depends a bit on you and your personality and where you're going to connect with the mentor. There's no set way, but at least a few ways to think about it. Moving on to the next question, I often, in my industry consulting, I often joke with my wife that I continue to get older and everyone stays 25 over the years. But I say that because I find myself often learning tons from the younger folks that I work with or the newer folks coming into the business. And I was curious what you all have learned if you think about reciprocal mentoring, right, and what you've learned from mentoring or sponsorship relationships that you've had.
Yeah, as developing the career and getting more senior, it is unfortunately that effect of the pyramid, right? That I started to get a little bit more lonely in the ranks as you come up to the ranks, and looking to people that look like me may not be as easy as you grow. So as I've been gaining mentees, and in hindsight, I thought it had only been the past 2-3 years, but looking back, I was mentoring a few of my colleagues and as junior associates. So you never know, but I hope I did the best to give them the best advice. But looking, and those mentees have become actual mentors to me. A lot of the mentees that I have remind me a lot of myself with their own individuality. So in mentoring them, I've found routes that I didn't have clear when I was going through the stages, and how I could change those going through my career. And they're great encouragers to keep going, and how building that network of women in my profession, of really helping each other. I see that with the mentees, and that's what I really get out of them, and not only just telling them, yeah, it's kind of hard, but you can do it. Be a go-getter. It takes a lot of effort to reach out to people. So also that, mentees, when they reach out to me, and looking back, it was like, that's great that they're doing that. It took me, a lot of effort to reach out to people that I wanted to connect. But I'm glad that they're doing it, and it comes out naturally. Like seeing it from the other side of the table now, having mentees reach out to me, it's great. You're complimenting the mentors. So again, it's not just a one-way street. I have two mentees that I can really resonate with this, that they probably have helped me even more than I have helped them.
I will say, lately, the topic of reverse mentorship has come to me from a woman on my team who's really been pushing us to think a lot more about equity. So I've run this team for 6 years, and I think my inclination from the start was to really look at the problems that I thought we could scale up solutions toward. So having big programs for talent development or big programs for entrepreneurs where we could reach thousands of people. That's always been my inclination. And I have a woman on my team who joined about 2 years ago, and she sort of sat back and she said, well, it's great that we have all this scale, But what about equity? Are we really picking the right programs to really help women who are disadvantaged across all dimensions to have the resources they need? So we might strive for equal outcomes, but of course, we're not starting from equal places. So the notion of equity, which is to give people tools so you can start from the same place, that's what we need to inject more of our work around. And so I've been really very influenced by this woman on my team. We are rethinking the things that we do. We are going to look at how our organization can be more equity driven from the start. And so that's just a topic I really appreciate, as I had not really been thinking about that in a very deep way.
And then at the Estee Lauder companies, there is formal reverse mentorship program, and it's incredible, right? I think the company shifted into that mode a few years ago as our consumer landscape changed, communication channels changed. You know, they found the need to have, you know, these very senior, I mean, I'm talking executive leadership team, be paired with, you know, younger, more junior people to have them help them set up a TikTok account, understand, you know, what maybe not LOL means, but, you know, some iteration of that. And it's been incredible. I mean, I see people like Jane Lauder, my own boss, who's the president of Latin America, bring their reverse mentor into meetings with leadership teams, you know, before answering a question, ask them what they think. I've seen how it's really, I mean, elevated their knowledge in all of these areas that are important to drive our business, but also given such visibility where it might have taken, you know, 10 years to be able to get to that point where you're presenting to people, you know, of the executive leadership team. So I love that program. Right now I'm kind of in limbo, not old enough or, you know, at that level or young enough to be part of the program, but I think you seek out those things like you mentioned informally, right? I still, you know, I'll ask somebody how to use PowerPoint in a new way, a new feature that might be there. So I think it's, you know, always seeking that out and also understanding one of the key values of Estee Lauder companies is around leading from every chair and translating that to learning from every chair and having teachers in every chair. And so how do you seek out those experiences so that you're constantly evolving your knowledge base is really important. And I'm glad that the company has something formal, but also seek it out informally if yours doesn't.
If you come to consulting, you'll definitely be old enough for reverse mentoring. So, but,
I'm sure I will.
But changing gears a little bit, women in mentoring or sponsoring, is it different, more important, the same? Any changes, any adjustments, right, as you think about women in mentoring? Is it more critical or less critical?
Meaning for women, is it more? Yeah, I think it's probably more. It's great for everyone, it's important for everybody, but women have, I think, a harder road to climb. You see it in the numbers still. Women don't have representation at the senior-most levels, and we see in every industry, really, that pipeline narrowing as you get to the top. So in order to get to the top, we do need more women who are more actively sponsored and counseled to get there. I'll tell a story about a woman who was at JP Morgan for quite a while who is just so inspirational and a great example of this. Her name is Tasunda Duckett, or T. Duckett, and right now she's the CEO of TIAA. So she had spent her career first at Fannie Mae, so really in the mortgage business, then came to JP Morgan and was in our mortgage business. And she created a very special sponsor relationship with a man named Gordon Smith, who ended up running our retail bank. And Gordon had seen her really early on in her career. And he was the kind of leader, probably the best at doing this that I've ever seen, at really seeing people not only at his table, but further down in the organization who really were talented and can use the help. And so he watched as T was moving around and had a very strong hand in really giving her other jobs. He promoted her to be head of our auto business. She did not have a background in autos or auto credit, but she did that for a few years. And then ultimately he promoted her to head the whole retail bank. And now she's the only Black woman who is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I really credit Gordon and I credit her talent as the reasons that she was moved around and really got all that experience to be able to now lead this company. So I think it's critical. It's not done enough. And men have a very big role to play here because women can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah, and I was just talking with Soraya before the panel, and we were talking about how women tend to undersell themselves, and how, with the peers that you see men, really putting themselves out there and saying, I'm the best of this, I've done all of this, and women tend to, find like, I'm not perfect, this is all I'm missing, I've done this, but I still have to work on all these things, list of things. And that comes up on, as growing in the career, like you have supervisors that review you, you supervise, you review your, as a supervisee, your supervisors. As you get more senior, you have to review yourself, and that's what we call the I love me memos. And so it's very critical at women's career to have that mentorship and really bring you and give you the advice of this is how, you should highlight all of this. And we need that, I think and personally need that reminder whenever I can of, yes, help me, and even with my partner, put bullet points, and whenever I said, however, it was like, no. Leave it at that, you're, the best at this, period. Leave, the constructive criticism aside, but for this, you have to realize all your accomplishments. So having someone there, I think it's very critical to give you advice and guide you, and whoever, shape or form that mentor is, a man, can give you a little bit more perspective on how to do it, or a woman, or whoever you look up to, or your partner, just to constantly advise and remind you of all the strengths that you hold.
For me, women mentors have made all the difference in my life. In my career, I've had virtually every door that's been open for me has been by a woman who's walked through it before. So, I think it's critical. And also, the understanding, we talked a little bit in the morning about work-life balance. I remember when I just got back from maternity leave, I was asked to speak on an internal panel. And they said, we want you to talk about work-life balance. And I'm like, guys, I can barely brush my hair. And this whole thing, I was like, I don't think that can exist. And having a woman tell me, you know what, it's fine. Answer the question how you want to answer the question. Maybe we need to change the question. So having women understand these common, I think, experiences and help you navigate them with, authenticity and transparency and honesty, I think has been very important. And then the topic of allies, I've also been incredibly lucky to have, amazing male allies in the company and my career as my bosses as well that have, been there for me. But I think women seek out women as much as you can as well, because the common experiences are really important as you grow.
Excellent. Final question, unless we take some from the audience, on just what advice do you have to all the folks here today about how to think about mentorship, sponsorship, how to drive it, how to give it?
Maybe I can jump in. I think if you're considering being a mentor, if you've been approached to be a mentor, make sure that you have the time for it and that you're prioritizing it. I think it's one thing to take the call and take the initial meeting of saying, sure, I'll mentor you. But if you really don't have the bandwidth, I think you're doing a disservice to the person that is seeking your mentorship. And then I think for the person that's looking for a mentor, seek them out, knock on the doors. I think you'd be surprised how many people are really looking to have that type of relationship and want to be mentors and have the time for it and the dedication. And like several of us have said, mentors can come from anywhere in your company, peers outside your company, et cetera. So I think it's like dedicate the time to it if you're asked to do it, and be brave enough to ask somebody to do it for you.
I would say on the sponsorship topic, you don't have to have the CEO or the senior leaders of your company be your sponsors. They can be somebody right around you. If you're starting your career, they could be someone at that very next level up, because what happens time and again is you develop that great relationship, and as they rise in their career, they're bringing you along with them. I'm sure you've seen this many times. People around you who are just helping you day to day, they're the ones who know your work the best. And so when you really get into that daily relationship and ability to share what you're working on and people see your skills, again, you will hopefully rise together. So I will say that on the sponsorship front. I will say something totally unrelated, and I will talk about compensation for a minute. You definitely want to talk to your peers who are male about their compensation. Do not only talk to your female friends about what they make, because that might not be the full answer. You need to get input from the male colleagues around you to see what they also make, so you're very prepared to go in and have those conversations on comp.
Having seen a lot of benchmarks, it is always different. It's an important.
And to tie that of the mentee from a mentee perspective, having seen it from the other end of being a mentor, mentee really is the one driving the relationship. While it's very important for the mentor to be available and really commit to the relationship, the mentee is the one driving what you're looking out of that mentorship. So, and as an experience, like do reach out, do follow up, don't stalk, but do follow up and do note the interest and that you're a go-getter. I think that is even more important as a sponsee of really having that focus and be interested in what you're building together with your sponsor.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Right here in front. I love it.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. We normally talk about asking someone to be your sponsor, but I also believe that you're all great women, and if someone asks you to be the sponsor, believe it, like accept it. Don't look like you are not yet prepared to be a sponsor, and say, no, I know someone that it will be better for you as a sponsor and likes your professional path. So it's also part of the women insecurities that we always say, we're not ready, we have this yet to be corrected, like I still have this to get better. So if someone already asks you, trust it and try to take the time to be a sponsor. It will also lead you on a really nice experience and you will learn from your sponsoree.
Yeah, the comment from the audience, in case folks in the back couldn't hear directly, was if someone reaches out to be a sponsor, you are qualified, right? Be excited and jump in, and you'll get a lot out of it. Any other thoughts? No? Otherwise, the panel will be saying after to sign up sponsorees so, and mentees. So, but thanks so much, everybody. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Samantha, Marcela, Nicole. Thank you. That was great. And Jim. All right. We're now moving into our final segment, our table leader session with table leaders. As a reminder, this part is off the record, so we want to say thank you to everybody who joined us online. And we hope that you join us next year. So with that, I leave you in the hands of Randy Melcy, Vice President for Public Policy Programs and Corporate Relations at the America Society Council of the Americas, to introduce the table leader session. Randy,